Members of the company, this is your Places call. Places, please. Places for the top of the podcast. Places, please.
Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the glitz and not-so-glam of Broadway, education, and everyday life with Uncommon Sense. Join hosts Christopher Smith and Charna Lopez as they bring you the best stories and shenanigans that seemingly prove how elusive common sense can really be. So take a little time for yourself to hang out with the dynamic duo Charnopher. And no leaving early, because you might just miss that 11 o'clock number.
Stand by music. Music, go.
Uncommon sense, the 11 o'clock
number. And we are Charnopher.
Da-na-na-na. 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 Na-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na. Name that show, Christopher. Name that show.
Is it perhaps the Addams Family?
Ding, ding, ding. Winner. Great guess.
Oh my gosh. So I used to watch the old Addams Family TV show. That's how I learned the song first. I loved that old
from that.
TV
It's
show.
so catchy. And I feel like it's anybody hears that, they know it. Even if they don't know what the Addams Family is, even if they don't know what it's about, they hear that and they'll start singing. Usually they'll start singing like the one from the TV show, right? And they won't know the words, but they're like, oh, I know what that's from.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. Hi, everybody. Guess what we're going to be talking about today?
If you couldn't figure it out.
We're going to be talking about Phantom of the Opera.
Well, the other day I thought we talked about anything goes, apparently. So whatever.
We're going to be talking about the Addams Family today, which I'm excited about. Christopher and I have been talking about what shows we want to sort of discuss or delve into. And I don't know, there's a lot of them. But this one in particular, I don't know. I'll give my background on it a little bit, I guess, and we can kind of just go from there. But, and I know you have an article, Christopher, that you have some info from. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned you watched the TV show.
I did.
So I think, I remember my parents kind of watching it. It wasn't like a thing. Like there were certain shows that my parents watched, like Three's Company and MASH and like those type of I
loved Three's
my
Company.
Parents, yeah, me too. Laverne and Shirley, like my parents would watch those and I remember like watching them too or like catching parts of it. Addams Family would be like, I think if it was just on or whatever. So I kind of remember. Cut to, they made a movie of it. It was fine. I liked it. Cut to, the musical came out. And I remember being like, what? How are they going to make a musical out of this? But then I heard, I think Pulled was the first song that I heard from the show. And Krista Rodriguez, queen of all queens, singing that song. And one thing I remember really appreciating, and I would have to look up the year it came out. I can look it up in a minute. But I felt like we were in such a time of skrelting, yelly, sing as high as you can Broadway. And I remember being so impressed and just loving Krista's voice in that song because she's singing in the sky, but she's singing and it's easy to listen to. Like I could listen to that song a million times and she just has control. And I remember really, really loving that song. And I tell that to a lot of students who like to sing that song for either auditions or for showcases or in class, where I'm like, awesome, this is a great song. It's a really good acting song, which I love. But also, please do not think that you are going to scream the E or whatever that is in the middle of the song. Like we're going to sing it and it's going to be controlled and it's going to sound healthy and appropriate because it's like when, Frozen and Wicked and all these ones come out where these kids want to just skrelt it. So that was my first experience with it. And I remember really loving that song. Then when it started to, I didn't see it on Broadway. I saw some bootlegs. I saw some pieces. And then when it started to tour and kind of to make its way into like the regional and then eventually into children's theater, I remember it just taking off in youth theater. Like every organization was doing it. Every school was like, that's it. And I was like, I don't know. It didn't really intrigue me. I was kind of like, well, I like that one song. There were a couple other songs that I'd heard that I was like, oh, that's fun, you know?
Yeah.
And then the students at OSHA were begging me to do the show.
Oh, I didn't realize that they were begging you to do it.
Oh, yeah. Because at the time it was super popular. And, you know, then they have their heart set on, oh, I want to do this role. I want to, whatever. And I usually, when I choose shows, there's a couple reasons that I choose them. Number one, if I'm going to direct it, I need to be interested, ready to enjoy it, take on a challenge, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. I need to ensure that I have the students that can do it. You know, like right. I can't do, you know, singing in the rain if I don't have a tap dancer, that kind of thing. And
soft shoe.
Then the musical director, Becca, correct. We could change it up. You know, I want her to, whoever the musical director is, but Becca does most of my high school shows. I want her to be interested. So when I brought it up to her, she was like, yeah, she was sort of really into it. And then I had this moment of like, okay, well, maybe I just like go out on a limb or take a chance and do something a bit different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it started, we auditioned. We had fabulous cast when I first directed it. Fabulous cast at OSHA. I also directed it again after that, and also great cast. But at OSHA, it was my first one. And I remember being really excited because the kids were so excited.
Yes. We talked about that with Newsies and how important that is for the buy-in of the cast.
100%. If the kids, and I think it goes both ways, right? You want the kids to be excited, but there's also, as a teacher and a mentor and a director, a moment where sometimes you got to get the kids excited, right?
True.
We've talked about that too, where they just want to do, you know, they sometimes think musicals only exist within the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And to take a line from our friend Katy Perry Page, like, you know, there were musicals written before the year 2000. Like there are shows that were written.
Go back. There are?
Because sometimes our students just live in the present and what the newest thing is. And, you know, so I think that goes both ways. You want them to be excited, or sometimes you have to help them get excited. Mm-hmm. But with this one in particular, they were very excited. So the energy was great. And one really cool thing about the Addams Family, if you don't know it, the ensemble in the show, they're the ancestors, which I think was a really cool choice for the writers to make, because it gives this ensemble of very specific characters. So you have like a conquistador, you have a 20s flapper, you have the bride, you have the pilot, you have the caveman. And it's really fun because those kids, or those people, if you do the show, it's not like you're townsperson number 5 or you're tree number 32, you know, or you're, you know, the 9th flying monkey or whatever. You have a very specific character. And I think that gives you really great buy-in from the students. Like, oh my gosh, I have character work to do,
right,
as an ensemble member, and a jumping off point. I will say I've seen several productions of it now. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not done well.
Oh dear.
And I think the ensemble is where it's hit or miss. I think most people you know the Wednesday Addams character, you know Gomez, you know Morticia, you know Fester. Like,
who doesn't know Fester?
Exactly, right? And Pugsley, he's got and the grandma has a pretty big role in the show too, which I like. So those, I don't want to say they're easy, but they're easy. It's that ensemble of ancestors that I feel like make or break that show. So how much you use them, how much a director allows them to be part of the scene work. So we're in the middle of rehearsal at OSHA, and I'm not going to say where, but a regional theater in the vicinity was putting on the show. And so my student who played Gomez and we took one other student. I'm like, we should go see it.
Was that Topher?
So we kind of took like it was Topher. We took a little field trip. Oh no.
Oh.
It was I'm not going to say bad. It was not something that I was like, oh, let's do the Addams Family. Like, I was like, oh no, like, is this what ours is going to look like? They missed all of those nuances in the show with the ensemble, with the ancestors. And I think it was like a light bulb moment for me of like, oh my gosh, that's a huge part of it. So instead of focusing just on the family, trying to bring in that ensemble, which is in every show, as you know, and you've seen, and we've worked enough together, but in particular, that one, kind of giving them their roles in that way. That was a big part of that show for me.
Yeah, and that's always a tricky thing with the ensemble in general. It's like, what exactly is the ensemble role in a particular show? Is it truly fully supporting, or is it like there's all these little chunks that have their own little features?
Yeah. And I think, and Christopher, if you ever get to see the show or if you ever get to do it.
I saw it when you did it.
Yeah, you did. At Spotlight or at OSHA?
OSHA.
At OSHA. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another reason that the ancestors are so important is that they are part of the storyline. So in the beginning, they get locked out. So they come out of their tombs, or they're like in the whole opening number.
Out of the graveyard.
And they're dancing when they do like line dance or whatever, right? And then they all try to go, it's once a year, they come out and all the ancestors party, right? And so that's the whole opening. And then they're all trying to go back in to the tomb. I guess it'd be a tomb. Yeah, they're all trying to go back in there, and it's locked. And Fester's like, we have to help Wednesday and her love situation. And until love, I forget the exact line, you can't go back in. So throughout the entire musical, they have a tactic. They have a motivation.
Yeah.
To like, they're part of it, right? And I think that's what makes that show fun to me. It is super smart, right? Like, you could have just been like, oh, you're going to be the people in the beginning, and then we have just the family. Like, it was a really great way to write in an ensemble. And then everyone feels like they have part of moving the show along, and they have, they have skin in the game in each scene.
Right. Yeah, that was going to be my question, because I don't remember it well. Are they really pretty heavily involved throughout in different characters and stuff?
So they say they're the exact same characters through the whole thing, but they're in a lot of numbers. Okay. So they're like spirits in the house during the whole thing. And so they're in most of the large numbers, and especially like full disclosure, that number where she drinks the potion and she like gets crazy. I love that number. They're in there. They're wanting to move this plot along. They're wanting to help Wednesday and get like, so they're a huge part of the show. I've seen the production done where they're also like statues in the house throughout scene work.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I like that it's a big ensemble, and it's not a big ensemble like, hey, you're factory worker number 9. Like, right. You actually have a character. So I think that's probably my favorite part of it. I also think it's hilariously written. Like, if you do the original, like especially with Gomez and Morticia, it's just if you get a good Gomez, I mean, he is the backbone of that show. Some of that dialogue is so funny. You know those shows where they say a line, you've sat next to me, where I laugh loudly like it's the first time I've heard it, but every single time, because it's so funny. There was a line in Anything Goes that was like that for me every single time. And there was one in Matilda. We just did Matilda. And my daughter, Ruby, was in it. And she's like, Mom, I could hear you in the back of the theater every time they said that line, laughing so loud. I'm like, because it's funny. She says something like, did I just not tell you she's a gangster? And I think that is the funniest thing in the entire world. Oh my gosh. Did I just not say she's a gangster? I mean, I'm just going around saying it all over the place. My accent's terrible. Sorry, but
that's all right.
I thought it was so darn hilarious.
That is so funny. I also just noticed that you may as well be in Addams Family right now. your outfit is
Oh my
very
gosh.
supportive of it.
Is it?
I feel
Thanks.
like it's like I just feel like it gives me
Thanks.
Addams Family
It could
vibes.
fit. It could fit. A little stripey,
Yeah.
action. I will say something with Addams Family that was a challenge at a youth theater level were the like gadgets. So Pugsley is on like a torture device.
Oh, yeah,
and gets
yeah.
pulled, and it has to like you have to get the gimmick, and then there's a torture chair.
gotta get
that's
a
in
gimmick.
scene. That's another show we could talk about. Actually, that needs to be.
Okay.
That's going to be
That's on
coming
the
soon.
list.
Coming soon. I have history with that show, and good history. That's Gypsy, friends. If you don't know Gypsy, and you know what I love about. Wait, we're going to sidebar.
Go.
That's a show that you can be in at like, especially as a female, at every age of your life.
That's true. That's true.
I
All the
still
way
have a
from
dream
Baby
to do
June
2
to
other
Mama
roles in that
Rose.
show. That's what I'm saying.
That
Okay,
should be the
that's next
tagline of
episode.
Gypsy.
Write it down. Write it down.
Tagline of Gypsy from Baby June to Mama Rose.
To Mama Rose. So, but back to Addams Family. You have to have these devices, and they either need to be built or rented or whatever it may be, because there are a couple different like not magical, but like things, mechanisms that you have to have. And there's a lot of mystery and magic that happens in that show. So that was a part of it. That was a little bit of a challenge, just a little bit of planning and figuring out, you know, where we could rent that from, or how we're going to build it, or how it's going to work, things like that.
So how did you end
I
up
also
figuring
love-
that out, actually? Because that feels like something that they would offer for rental from the rights company. You know, like things like that that are so
I find
integral.
Scenically, licensing companies don't offer much, which that's a business. Somebody should take that on, because I live in 2 youth theater worlds right now, and that is our most difficult thing, is finding.
But that also feels
scenic
like something
elements.
that you're going to have to build sort of locally, you know, like, because you don't want to
Yeah,
be
so
shipping it all
we've
over the
used
country.
a company. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because that would be expensive, right?
Yeah.
At OSHA, we've built several things. We use a couple different places around here that will rent some pieces to us, or if a theater has built something and I've seen it, or I know like, hey, such and such a theater just did this show. Let me reach out and see, like, did they build it? Do they have it? Did they rent it? And we kind of go that way. We also have, you know, my husband and Kim Young, shout out, and Kendall. I'll put Kendall in there too. Saint Kendall. People who will build things for shows. The problem becomes there's nowhere to store it.
Yeah.
So if you start building these larger pieces for shows, you either have to break them down at the end, you know, or be like, who wants this? I think we rented at OSHA. It was built. Both things were built. And then at Spotlight, we rented a couple of those pieces, I think from Riverside or Stage Monkey.
I think that's also
That's
just
where we
something
got-
for our theater creators out there. Like, never hurts to ask. Like, if you see a production that's not a professional production, but like a local production, just reach out.
Yeah. Well, it's a small, I think if you talk to any Broadway person, they say the same thing. Like, Broadway seems at a level when you're not at Broadway and maybe you're a young kid or a younger performer that's like, I want to go to Broadway. It seems like this huge, crazy. And when you get there, it is a very small community.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can attest to that on the performer end, but also on the creative side. You know, I have a friend in particular who I want to bring on this show, her and her husband, who she was on the performing side for a long time and is now on the creative side. And it's a very small inner workings of people, but it's the same thing here. And I think I try to have relationships with as many people as possible, and they, you know, vice versa. I have several people with youth theaters around here who will reach out to me. Where did you get that? What are you using for this? Or when you did this show, what did you use? Where did you get this? Even when we were doing Matilda, I reached out to Shannon Habelow, who you know, who had done the show several years ago at her place. And I think it's important to be able to have that open line of communication and support each other, you know?
Yeah, we should have Shannon on
Help
here
a
and
sister
talk about
out.
all kinds of things.
Well, and that brings me to Little Shop. I know we can finish out with Addams Family, but Little Shop, a lot of people don't do that show, are really nervous and afraid to do that show because of
The
plans,
plant.
because of Audrey 2 and the puppet. And Stage Monkey, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Stage Monkey. We might have to give him a little, like, actually, they'd be fun to bring on and talk about, like,
Yeah. that's true.
puppetry and prop building. They have that Audrey 2 we used at Spotlight was
Oh, it was
amazing.
killer, literally.
And they're the nicest. It was killer. You have the pieces like that. You have to be able to find somewhere to rent them from. Same thing
Yeah.
with like the Olaf puppet for Frozen, or they have all that stuff at Stage Monkey. But you got to have somewhere like that for those certain shows where you need something very specific.
Right. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. But yes, Addams Family. So I did a little research, and I found out, Charna, you may or may not know, that when Addams Family opened on the Broadway, it didn't...
What year did it open?
This says about 10 years ago, and this was written in 2020, so about 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. And it ran, so because they had a big box office advance, it ran for 20 months. But
20 months or 20 weeks?
20 months.
Okay.
20 months. But it did not get a good review, like good reviews at all. This says, to quote, the Broadway reviews for Addams Family were gruesome, the kind of notices that in theory could kill a show. So
That doesn't surprise me. And I think, and I will say, I always like say, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but then I still always interrupt you. So I feel like at this point, I'm going to stop apologizing.
yeah, that's just the standard.
So there's an original version.
Yes.
And then there's a revised version when they toured and what is
Correct.
licensable
Correct.
for theaters. And they did a really great job with the revision because they took out. So in the I was very interested to find out about this because I already feel like in the revision, Gomez sings 1,000,005 songs. In the original, he had even more.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that, and I think that was probably part of it, of like the focus was so much on one specific character, and then it was like the other characters would kind of intermingle and cross over instead of like
So it really wasn't
connecting more.
the Addams Family, it was the Gomez show.
Yeah. And he's kind of like the narrator, not narrator, but he's the one that like breaks the fourth wall a little bit and kind of talk like he's that role. But yeah, I couldn't believe when I was like, wait, what? How did he have more songs in this? Because he's got one song that there's like 4 reprises of. And I'm like, oh my
Okay.
gosh. I think I cut 1 out or 2 out when I did the show.
Yeah. Well, you got to reprise those reprises. So
Yeah. And like Lucas, Wednesday's love interest,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish he had a little bit more. Like he's got a couple duets with her, but I remember thinking, oh, it'd been nice if he had a solo, like or somehow tie that, like have a little bit more of them together. But
yeah. Well, yeah, because that's what I'm glad you talked about that, because they did completely revamp it. And it's a rare show to do that, to completely retool after Broadway. There's been a few, I think.
Yeah.
But it proved an enduring hit in youth and community theater, and it played in more than 36 countries. That's a lot of countries. Yeah. And
that's a lot of countries.
Yeah. The president and CEO of Theatrical Rights Worldwide, Steve Spiegel, said it's their best seller by volume of a production. So
could you even name 36 countries?
No, me personally, no, I cannot.
You know who could is my son, dude. That kid is like Mr. Geography.
Wow, a geographical wonder.
Yes, correct. He is, which I love, dude. I need his help. It's like that show. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? No, I am not. My son would beat me
this 5th
anytime.
grader. Mm-mm.
He's on it.
I kind of want to go on that show.
You know what? I want to say it's really interesting, but it's actually not. It actually makes sense because once the show was completely revamped and re-edited, and It's entertaining. It's a classic story, not the musical story, but like the characters. You have anybody our age or older, they know the characters.
Literally half a century.
Yeah.
More than half a century.
And I think that, I mean, this can tie into our next episode where I want to discuss sort of jukebox musicals, movie musicals that have turned into Broadway, that whole kind of thing. But this is one of those where this is obviously based off of a TV show, and maybe kind of hits home this idea of just because it was a successful TV show and or movie and or fill in the blank doesn't necessarily mean it's going to transition to the stage smoothly.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned in the last episode that you felt that way about Moulin Rouge. And I haven't seen the stage production of Moulin Rouge yet, which was disappointing. I meant to go see it when it was here.
So you do need to see it. And again, I grew to love it. I grew to love it. And what I found in talking to a lot of people about it. So when I went in New York to the preview, I took Maggie with me. I think I said this in the last one. Did I say that? I had Maggie with me. And
sorry if everybody were repeating because we all have short-term memory loss.
And Mia. I had Mia Kaplan. It was Maggie and Mia Kaplan. And they were in New York doing some summer intensive. And I was there doing a teacher's workshop. And I was like, we got to go. My friend's in it. And so we went. And neither of them had seen the movie.
Oh.
And it was a very different initial response to the show. They were losing their minds because they had no idea, right? Where I was like, I know what Moulin Rouge is. I'm expecting these mashups. I'm expecting these songs. Yeah. And then, like I said, 15, 20 minutes into it, I was like, okay, whoa, I gotta reset. I gotta not think of the movie. And I've got to just look at this as like through a new lens.
Yeah.
And once I did that, I was like, okay, now we've got the movie and we've got the musical and we've got to keep them separate from each other.
Well, and maybe that's a little bit what happens here with Addams Family too. It's like everyone's going to have their preconceived notions, which is sort of the tricky thing of doing this type of thing where you already have a hit in another genre. Yeah. But you're bringing it in, so.
And I think there's a lot of things that go into it, and in our next episode. So see now you gotta tune in for our next one. I'd love to discuss a lot of these movies turned musicals because I think there are so many factors. I think the music is a huge part of it. So if you don't have good songs, or you're just kind of like peppering in music into what was a movie script, that sucks. Or let's do some choreo. Like there has to be that music. It's a musical. I mean, that music has to be strong.
You have to name that show. You can't just drop it and not
Something
say
Rotten.
What it's from. Something Rotten. Every time I say it, I want to say like something rotten this way comes.
Isn't it funny how certain lines from certain shows just stick in your head? Did I not just tell you she's a gangsta? Come on, that's never leaving. I love you.
Yeah, well, at least yours is a line. Mine's like mixing, what is that, Macbeth? I don't know, something, I don't know. I quit.
Yes, I think it is Macbeth. Anyway, I think that overall, especially for a youth theater level, it challenges kids. It gives our ensemble students a really great piece of work to do some character work in. I think another older show that does that with the ensemble is Crazy for You. So Crazy for You is hands down one of my favorite shows. Yeah. One of my favorite shows I've ever been in. Maybe, and not one of my favorite shows to watch per se, or listen to the music per se, but to be in. And it was because of that, our tight-knit ensemble where they give, you have Moose and you have Patsy and they all have these characters. It's not just like the townspeople. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think having those little character moments, that makes for a super fun ensemble experience.
Yeah.
And if you have a show that doesn't have that, you create it,
Yeah, and that's what I was also going to talk about when you mentioned that earlier, because I've seen or been a part of shows where we literally create characters for the ensemble. Like we created names for each one, and they had to excuse me, they had to like create a whole character based around their name only. So,
and that's just a good director. You know what I mean? Like, especially with it now as an adult, as a grown up, you better figure that out on your own. You better be ready to do it. Like, but as a kid,
ready to go.
But that's good teaching and good directing of like, hey, you feel like you're just, you know, classmate number 4. Give yourself a name.
Yeah.
Give yourself a story. My big thing is relationships on stage. So I always tell kids like, okay, cool. You're townsperson number 5, but you have a backstory. You have a relationship with townsperson number 7 and number 12. And
like,
what's
do you
your
have
background?
beef with townsperson number 12?
Yeah. And use that, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the fun comes in for these younger people creating, you know, you make your own
and I
story.
love like literally the fine details. Like last week he made me mad because of this, or last week we became best friends because of this.
Yeah. And I think too, if it's a small enough cast, or if there's enough time, I love doing a rehearsal where I'll just be like, hold, Sally, what are you thinking right now? You know, like putting kids on the spot to see which kid is like in their character and which kid's just like, what am I going to eat for lunch? You know, like making sure they're like in the moment.
I don't know. Is it lunchtime?
I mean, that's probably me all the time. So I shouldn't judge a kid who's trying to think about their next snack because, you know,
we all love a snack.
I love me some snacks.
Between you and Lauren Lim Jackson.
Snacks Jackson, though, she holds the nickname for sure. I think you and I need to do the Addams Family.
Yes.
I think you would have a lot of fun with that music. And playing with the characters. I think it'd be fun. Put that
Maybe
on our
a couple
list.
more years at Spotlight. Or somewhere else before then.
Shows to do. Yeah. Maybe. We shall see.
Yeah.
All right, Christopher, any last words on the Addams Family?
Not really. I mean, it was the number 1 produced high school show 4 years in a row from like 2015 to 2019. And it was number 2 after that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
It just works well. Like the characters are accessible to the kids. You can do it. I mean, and there's a couple parts that might be like for certain youth theater, you would have to change or take out a bit of dialogue, but it's just funny enough. Like that doesn't seem inappropriate.
Well, I know we're going to talk about
interesting.
jukebox musicals next, but I feel like this is almost not, it's like the anti-jukebox musical. Like, whereas they take, with like a jukebox music, you take the songs and build a story around it. And here you take a story and fit in songs
around it. And some of the songs are really good.
Yeah.
Like there's a song Gomez sings in Act 2 that any parent would just cry because it's about like letting his daughter go. You know, she's going to get married.
No,
and it's called Happy Sad. Oh, and he sits there and sings it to her. And I'm like, no, I just cry. Like some of them are really, really great. And the song, Morticia's song, Death is Just Around the Corner is, I think a very cleverly written song with the lyrics. And if you can hear them when they're performing.
I love a clever lyric.
It's very funny. It's very funny and clever.
That's actually one of the reasons I love Wicked so much, actually. So many clever lyrics.
Well, and that's why I like 6.
Ah, yes.
Because a lot of the lyrics in 6, I'm like, oh, I didn't even catch that the first time or the 4th time. And then I'm like,
right?
Ooh. Yeah. Wicked, though, dude, Wicked for me, I've seen Wicked so many times. I've had so many people in that show and I've gone to see it. And every single time, I'm just like, oh, I love Wicked. I love it. I love it. I love the music. Well, it's one of my favorite composers. Yeah. Maybe my favorite composer.
Yeah.
So.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to choose. I think it's hard to choose a favorite composer. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Could you pick one musical composer?
I won't.
Because there's certain things I really like. What'd you say?
I said, no, I cannot. I won't be forced. You can't make me.
I think you gotta have, it's like choosing a favorite musical, right? You kind of need to have a top 3. Yeah. And I think it's all about style. So Stephen Schwartz, obviously, like just, there's so many. And then I love Ahrens and Flaherty.
Mhm.
I love like,
I love
and then
JRB.
obviously Sondheim. Yeah. So it's the vibe, right? It's the,
Yeah.
and I think it's also certain things you love about certain composers or in certain shows. So I couldn't choose, but I will say clever lyrics get me.
Yeah.
I do like
I don't know.
it.
I think Stephen Schwartz topped himself with Wicked. Because I mean, I like his other stuff, but I don't love musically his other stuff as much as I enjoy what he did with Wicked.
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
But it's also, here's another fun fact. It's also about the orchestrator. And actually, it might even be more about the orchestrator than the composer.
Yeah.
Because
Just goes
a
to show, like,
poorly
the
orchestrated
collaboration.
show can sink a great song, but a wonderfully orchestrated show can elevate a mediocre song.
Very wise, Christopher Smith. Very
you.
wise.
I have my moments.
You are not a gangster.
And on that note,
I
I think we're signing off
that's
on that
a great
one.
way to end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Come listen to our next episode next week. If you follow us on Instagram, Charnopher Official, come say hi, drop a line. All our info is on uncommonpod.com. And have a great week. Charnopher out.
You're not a gangster. Oh my gosh. I have to like get that line.
This concludes another episode of Uncommon Sense. If you're ready for more of this fresh, hilarious, and unique perspective on the world of entertainment, education, and life, be sure to subscribe right now to catch every episode. If you gasped, laughed out loud, or even snorted, share the show with your friends and aspiring entertainers because, let's be real, sharing is caring. For more Charnopher, tune in to their witty insights by checking out the website uncommonpod.com or connecting on social media. Tune in next week and get the real insider scoop on another episode of Uncommon Sense.